All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into Gen Plant Planting. It's this fascinating report that basically exposes all the craziness that can happen when development projects clash with the environment.
Yeah, it's like this really in-depth look at one specific project, but it brings up all these bigger questions that I think we can all relate to.
For sure, for sure. So basically, Gen Planting, we're following these two guys, Kesser and Steen, and they're like these everyday citizens who are just like, what's going on here with this development project?
And they start digging deeper, and they find some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever heard of a tree hotel?
I think I've seen those online, those fancy ones where you sleep in the trees.
No. This is the tree hotel where they send trees on vacation, I guess, where they bulldoze everything around them.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's the first thing Kesser and Steen uncovered. They're like, hey, all these trees from this forest are disappearing. And everyone's saying, oh, they're just going to this tree hotel. They'll be back.
But who believes that?
Exactly. My ficus isn't coming back from a vacation.
Yeah, no kidding. So what happens to the environment when you just rip out all the trees like that?
Well, that's where it gets even crazier. So, you know how when there's an empty lot or something, eventually plants start growing there, and then over time it turns into a forest.
Yeah, that's called natural succession, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's this whole process where nature basically rebuilds itself, and it's super complex and delicate, and all these different plants and animals depend on it.
Right. And so when you just come in and clear cut a whole area, you're basically disrupting that entire process.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on this super intricate ecosystem. And it can take decades or even centuries for it to fully recover.
And who knows if it'll even recover the same way.
Exactly. You can't just plant a bunch of new trees and expect everything to go back to normal. It's like trying to recreate a masterpiece painting by just throwing some random colors on a canvas.
It's just not going to be the same.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got these disappearing trees, we've got this disrupted ecosystem, and get this, the people who live near this former forest are now paying more in taxes.
Wait, what? How does that even make sense?
Well, apparently the local government has this automated system for assessing property values, and it's totally based on this outdated information.
So it still thinks there's a forest there.
Yep, even though it's a barren wasteland now.
Yeah.
So people are getting hit with these higher tax bills for a forest that doesn't even exist anymore.
That's insane. It's like they're being punished for something that's not even their fault.
I know, right? And the worst part is there's no way to appeal it because it's all handled by this computer system.
So there's no human oversight or anything?
Nope. It's the computer says you owe more taxes, so you owe more taxes. End of story.
That's the opposite of how it should work.
Totally. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, they're trying to create this super habitat for lizards using the residents' garden waste. Yeah, they're collecting all the grass clippings and leaves and stuff and dumping it in this designated area, and they're calling it a super habitat.
Like a lizard spa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Come relax in our pile of compost.
It's they're trying to make up for destroying the actual habitat by creating this artificial one.
Yeah, and it just raises all these questions is it actually beneficial for the lizards, or is it just a way for the developers to feel less guilty?
Right. Are they actually helping the environment, or are they just trying to greenwash the whole project?
Exactly. And Kesser and Steen, they don't really take a side on that, but they definitely make you think about it.
And that's the whole point, right? They're not trying to tell you what to think. They're just presenting the facts and letting you draw your own conclusions.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes Gen Plant Planting so powerful. It's not just about this one specific development project. It's about how we as a society approach these issues and how we need to be more critical of the narratives we're being told.
And how we need to hold these developers and governments accountable for their actions.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's about protecting our environment and ensuring that development is done in a sustainable and responsible way.
And that's something we all have a stake in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So next time you see a tree being shipped off to a tree hotel, or you get a tax bill for a forest that's vanished into thin air, remember Kesser and Steen, and remember that things aren't always what they seem.
And remember to ask questions and demand answers. Because the future of our planet depends on it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into Gen Planting.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep demanding a better future for all of us.
And maybe think twice before sending your plants on vacation.
Yeah, you never know where they might end up. Right, so today we're taking a deep dive into a place in Denmark a peninsula that initially everyone thought was like archaeologically boring, like there's nothing there.
Right.
But turns out...
Big surprise.
Big surprise. Yeah, we've got some excerpts from Udgravninger, which means
excavations.
Yes, excavations.
For those who don't speak Danish.
Exactly. And as we dig into this, you'll see this place is anything beachy boring.
Yeah.
We're talking like ancient islands, thousands of fish bones, and like this whole modern day struggle between preserving the past and like, building new stuff.
Yeah, the clash of past and present.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So first of all, picture this. You get 4 ancient islands.
Okay.
Right? And they're slowly merging over thousands of years.
Uh-huh.
And that is how this peninsula came to be.
That's wild. So that's like a fascinating example of what happens when the Earth literally rebounds after an ice age.
Yeah.
So we're talking the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago. And this area was right at the edge of a massive ice sheet. And as that ice melted,
wow,
the land started to rise, kind of like a slow motion bounce back.
That's wild.
And over time, those separate islands, they were pushed together by that rising land and created the peninsula that we see today.
So 12,000 years ago in Denmark, right, you've got these islands.
Yeah.
The ice is melting, the land is rising, and all that glacial movement leaves behind a very particular mix of like gravel and stone.
Right.
Not exactly the best foundation to like build on.
Not really ideal, no.
No, not at all. And in fact, the reports mention flive sand.
Flive sand.
Which is like drifting sand blowing in from the dunes across the fjord.
Right, yeah.
Doesn't sound fun.
Flive sand.
Yeah. So building anything on this peninsula is kind of like...
It's gotta be tough.
Trying to build a sandcastle on a windy beach.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
You might get it up.
Yeah.
But good luck keeping it there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. But honestly, it's what lies beneath this tricky soil that's really captivating.
Okay.
So remember how everyone thought this place was archaeologically insignificant?
Right. Yeah, the media had a field day with that one.
Nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah.
Famous last words.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then they found this massive midden.
The midden.
Yeah.
For those who don't speak archaeology, that's a fancy word for an ancient trash heap.
Exactly. It's where they dumped all their garbage.
Yeah. And this midden was overflowing with over 13,000 fish bones.
That's a lot of fish.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
So they were eating a lot of fish.
Yeah. And not just any fish bones. We're talking primarily cod.
Oh, wow.
And big ones at that.
Okay, so that completely changes.
It really does.
The idea of like a simple shellfish and small fish diet.
It throws that whole theory out the window.
Yeah, they were not just surviving, they were thriving.
They were eating well, for sure.
Yeah, and okay, so they're catching tons of cod, which, given the whole shifting sands situation and evidence of rising sea levels back then, tells you something about their fishing skills.
Absolutely.
These weren't just like weekend hobbyists.
These were pros.
Yeah, and get this, they also found bronze fish hooks.
No way.
That are remarkably similar to the ones we use today.
Wow, so they were using sophisticated tools even back then.
Yeah.
Huh, that's amazing. It paints a picture of a much more advanced and adaptable fishing culture than we initially thought.
Yeah.
You know, you have to consider these people were dealing with a changing climate, rising seas, and still managing to pull in these massive hauls of cod.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
It really is. It's amazing what you can learn from a pile of ancient trash.
Isn't it, though? It's like a time capsule.
Yeah, but there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Despite the challenging soil conditions, they've unearthed these incredibly well-preserved hearths.
Hearths? Wow.
Yeah, pits that may have been used for leather preservation.
Okay, so they're not just fishing, they're processing the leather, too. That's interesting.
And evidence of a bronze foundry.
A foundry.
Where they likely made tools, including those impressive fish hooks.
So they had a whole industry going on there.
It really does challenge our perception of this place.
It really does, but it leads us to, like, a really important question. How do we balance modern development with the preservation of this incredibly rich past?
Yeah.
Because, you see, there was an agreement in place, this Grafrid.
Grafrid?
Literally meaning grave peace.
Grave peace.
That was designed to protect these ancient settlements.
So it's like you can't just build willy-nilly.
Right, exactly. It's like a sacred zone, but there are some hints that this agreement might not be fully respected.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, you know how the local development plan mentions some missing documents?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely sets off some alarm bells for me.
Right. How can you enforce protection if you don't even know what needs protecting?
Exactly. It's like trying to guard a treasure chest when you don't know what's inside.
It does make you think that maybe someone's trying to sweep some inconvenient details under the rug.
Right. Maybe, just maybe.
Yeah, and it brings into focus this tension between preserving the past and accommodating the needs of the present.
It does. It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah, what kind of development is even feasible in an area as archaeologically sensitive as this?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, I mean, you've got these incredible fine, shifting sands,
Yeah.
and a grave peace agreement.
Right.
So anything more than like a luxury hotel for lizards just seems a bit optimistic.
Yeah, a little bit maybe.
Yeah.
But seriously, think about this.
Okay.
We started with a peninsula deemed boring.
Right. Nothing to see here, folks.
And uncovered a place teeming with geological and archaeological significance.
Yeah.
What happens when we lose sight of that past? What happens when knowledge of our history is forgotten, or worse, deliberately ignored?
That's a good question.
And specifically here in this unique corner of Denmark, how do we balance progress with respecting the fragile remnants of this ancient community?
Yeah.
Food for thought, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, keep digging, keep exploring, and always question the easy answers because the truth is often buried beneath the surface.
Well said.
All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're tackling urban wildlife. Can we actually create a haven for wildlife right in the middle of a city?
It's a fascinating question, and we've got some really unique source material for this one.
Like what?
Well, instead of some stuffy academic report, we're looking at this project through the eyes of two young nature enthusiasts, Kesser and Steen.
Okay, so like a kid's perspective on urban wildlife. Sounds cute.
It is, but they're also incredibly sharp. They're reviewing this pledge plan, which is basically a care plan for the area.
A pelagia plan, huh? Interesting.
And they're comparing it to other areas they know, and let me tell you, they don't hold back.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So we're getting a wildlife conservation audit with a side of, like, teenage snark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to call out the flaws in this plan.
Well, that's refreshing. I mean, so often these plans are written by, experts who maybe aren't as connected to the day-to-day reality of the ecosystem.
That's a great point. And that's what makes Kesser and Steen's perspective so valuable. They're out there every single day observing, tracking. They see the real impact of different management approaches.
So what are some of the things that have them fired up about this pelagia plan? What are their biggest concerns?
Well, first off, they're concerned about the lack of a detailed care plan. It's like, saying, we're going to build a house, but without any blueprints or instructions.
Yeah, that's not going to end well. So, like, what about the wiring? And where are we going to put the bathroom?
Exactly. And that's kind of how Kesser and Steen see it. They're like, hold on, what about the bats in the attic? Where are the squirrels going to hide their nuts?
They're thinking about all the practicalities that maybe the plan writers overlooked.
Yeah. And they also point out that this plan seems super focused on this one protected species of lizard, a Biolag 4 lizard, which needs strict protection under EU law.
Okay, so it's like a VIP lizard.
Exactly. And they're concerned that the plan is overlooking the needs of a whole bunch of other creatures.
So they're rolling out the red carpet for Mr. Lizard, while the rest of the ecosystem is left to fend for itself.
That's basically their argument. They're all about supporting a diverse ecosystem, and they see all these missed opportunities to create habitats for owls, bats, insects, all sorts of things.
And I bet a lot of those solutions don't require, like, tons of money.
You got it. That's one of the things that impressed me most about their analysis. They see all this potential for simple, effective solutions.
Okay, give me some examples. What kind of simple solutions are they talking about?
Well, one that really stands out is building nesting boxes for owls and bats. And, Kesser even jokes that even an 11-year-old could handle that.
Huh. I love that.
Yeah.
It's simple, but it makes so much sense.
Right. And it's completely absent from this pledge plan. Like, they were so focused on this one lizard that they forgot about everyone else who calls this area home.
It's like throwing a party, but only inviting one guest.
Exactly.
And this brings up another interesting point they made, right? About some poplar trees that used to be in the area.
Yes. They're convinced that these trees, which were mentioned in some old plans, were super important for tawny owls.
And what happened to the trees?
Well, they're gone now. And Kesser and Steen noticed that after the trees disappeared, some of the owls vanished too.
Okay, disappearing owls.
Mm-hmm.
That's getting good. So, do they have any theories about what happened?
What's really amazing is how closely these boys observe their surroundings. Like, they notice that individual owls have unique calls.
So they could track specific birds.
Yep, it's like they have this whole sonic map of the local wildlife in their heads. And they notice some of those voices just went silent.
That's incredible. So they're like nature detectives uncovering these little mysteries. And wasn't there also something about a disappearing pine marten?
Oh, yeah, that was another thing they mentioned. They were regularly tracking this pine marten, and then poof, it just vanished.
No trace. No sign of like roadkill or anything.
Nothing. And that detail about no roadkill is actually significant. It suggests that something happened to the pine marten within its habitat, something potentially connected to how the area is being managed.
That's a good point. It's like they're saying, hey, grown-ups, pay attention. There's more going on here than you realize.
You got it. And that's why their perspective is so valuable. They're picking up on nuances that a biologist just dropping in for a site visit might completely miss.
They're providing that extra layer of detail and insight that you wouldn't get from a standard ecological survey.
Precisely.
So essentially, these boys are saying, we see the world in a way you don't. And this ties into their brilliant critique of the project plan. They say the biologists are thinking in two dimensions. What do they mean by that?
Well, they're saying that the biologists are so focused on the defined boundaries of the project area.
Right, like the lines on a map.
But animals don't see those boundaries. A squirrel doesn't care if it's crossing from a protected zone into someone's garden or dodging traffic lights. It's all part of its habitat.
It's like the biologists are looking at a flat map, while Kesser and Steen are seeing the world in 3D. They understand how animals actually move and use the entire landscape.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about squirrels. They talk about bats over the pond at dusk, owls calling at night, and they wonder if the biologists are just, clocking out at 5 and missing all this crucial nighttime activity.
So they're out there living and breathing this ecosystem, 204/7, while the biologists are working a 9 to 5.
You got it. Which means the biologists might be missing a huge part of the picture.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us perfectly into part 2 of our deep dive. We'll explore some of Kesser and Steen's more specific criticisms and some of their fantastic suggestions for how to make this pledge plan truly work for all the inhabitants of this urban wildlife haven.
Yeah, it's like Kesser and Steen are saying, come on, wake up, sleepyheads. Nature doesn't stop just because it's 5 o'clock.
I love it. So it's not just about missing a few owl hoots. It's about understanding how the habitat actually functions around the clock.
Exactly. If they're not considering the full scope of wildlife activity, their pledge plan is kind of working with incomplete data.
That's a fantastic point. So they're not just critics, though, right? They have ideas about how to make things better.
Oh, yeah, they're full of ideas. And remember how we talked about them highlighting the potential for creating habitats without breaking the bank?
Yeah, they mentioned that a few times.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of their more budget-friendly suggestions?
Well, aside from the nesting boxes, they think there's huge potential in getting the local community involved.
Oh, I like that idea.
Right. Imagine neighbors, school kids, even retirees, all helping to build and maintain these habitat features.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's cost-effective, and it also creates a sense of, shared ownership and responsibility for the environment.
Exactly. It's like turning the whole neighborhood into a living classroom.
I love that.
Yeah.
And who knows the area better than the people who live there?
Right. They might have insights that even the most seasoned biologists would miss.
It sounds like Kesser and Steen are advocating for a more grassroots approach to conservation, one that really values local knowledge and community engagement.
Absolutely. They're not afraid to challenge that, traditional top-down approach where experts just come in, make decisions, and then leave.
They're saying, hey, we're here, we're paying attention, and we have something to contribute.
Exactly. And it's not just about pointing out problems. They're actively trying to be part of the solution.
Now, they did have some concerns about the plan's idea to build a pond to collect rainwater.
Oh, yeah. They were worried about the impact that could have on the existing wildlife.
Like, what kind of impact?
Well, they were asking things like, where will the deer drink if we change the water flow? Or will a new pond attract snakes? And even, will this disrupt the existing balance?
So they're thinking about those ripple effects, the unintended consequences.
You got it. That 3D thinking again. They're not just looking at one element in isolation. They're considering how it connects to everything else.
And they also brought up the fact that this project area is right next to a tornerosa carrot, which means Sleeping Beauty Pond.
Yeah, that's a special designation for these small, kind of hidden ponds with older trees full of biodiversity.
So even though this pond is technically outside the project boundaries, the animals won't see it that way.
Exactly. It all comes back to that interconnectedness they keep emphasizing.
And it highlights the need for a more holistic approach to conservation.
Absolutely. It's not just about protecting individual species. It's about preserving that whole web of relationships that makes up a healthy habitat.
So they actually said that the biologists are looking at a map and see the world in 2 dimensions. That's a pretty sharp observation coming from a couple of teenagers. What does it really mean to see the world and its wildlife in 3 dimensions?
It's about so much more than just, looking beyond the boundaries of the project area.
Okay, so what else is it about?
Well, they understand that animals use vertical spaces.
Vertical spaces.
Yeah, like trees, rooftops, even the sides of buildings.
Huh, I never thought of it like that.
They see how those green corridors, even small ones, can connect different areas and allow wildlife to move through the city.
And that's something a map wouldn't show you.
Right. And they're aware of things like light pollution impacting bats, noise pollution stressing out birds. They see the whole ecosystem as this living, breathing thing.
Not just a collection of isolated parts on a map.
Exactly. And that's what makes their insights so valuable. They're challenging us to, move beyond that checklist mentality of conservation and really see the world through the eyes of the wildlife we're trying to protect.
It's about being more mindful and observant.
Right.
Like Kesser and Steen are.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. How can we, as listeners who, maybe don't have that same level of daily immersion as these boys, apply this 3D thinking to our own understanding of the environment?
Yeah, it's like you're giving us this amazing lesson in mindfulness, just really paying attention to what's happening around us.
And it shows how expertise can come from these unexpected places, right? These young people have so much to offer.
Makes you wonder how many other, Kessers and Steens are out there, just brimming with ideas and passion.
Right. And how can we tap into that more?
Exactly.
Well, we need to, I think, move beyond that traditional expert model.
Yeah, get rid of the silos.
And embrace something more collaborative, more community-driven.
Like what would that look like?
Well, imagine schools partnering with local conservation groups.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Or neighborhoods organizing those, what they called, bioblitzes?
Yeah, bioblitzes.
Oh.
To document the species in their area.
Exactly.
So it's not just scientists coming in, doing their thing, and then leaving.
It's about building those lasting partnerships with the people who are actually living in the environment every day.
Right, empowering them to be stewards.
Exactly. Because ultimately, conservation isn't just a job for scientists.
It's a responsibility we all share.
It is. We can all learn to see the world through the eyes of Kesser and Steen.
Pay attention, be mindful.
And advocate for these vital ecosystems.
Well said. So I think this deep dive has really given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's challenged us to, I think, rethink our approach to conservation.
And to really value that local knowledge.
Because even small actions can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And it's given us this glimpse into the minds of those 2 young naturalists.
Who are clearly making a difference.
And inspiring others too, hopefully.
So, Kesser and Steen, if you're out there listening, keep up the amazing work.
Yeah, you guys are an inspiration.
And to all our listeners, I challenge you, take a page from their book, go explore your own environment, and see if you can start seeing the world in 3D. Just like Kesser and Steen, you never know what you might discover.